Hi, I'm Andrea, and I thought I'd make a video on this book I just recently finished and I really can't stop thinking of, and that is Future Home of the Living God by Louise Eldrich. This book is kind of a sci-fi dystopian book, and what I mean by that is that it takes place in a world where evolution has randomly decided to start going backwards. So every living thing on Earth has stopped evolving forwards and is now instead going backwards, which is a giant problem for humanity because the future of the human race basically is at stake. So this is during that intermediate time where a new normal is beginning to become established. People either can't have kids, are unfertile, can't have the kids, but they're either deformed or they're not altogether there, or the woman dies after childbirth or at childbirth, because survival rates for women during these times is anywhere between 15 to 20% because the body becomes allergic to the fetus as the time of birth nears for some reason. So our narrator is 26-year-old Cedar Songmaker, and she's a Native American woman, and she's part Ojibwe. I'm pretty sure I said that wrong, but she's part Ojibwe. She's half Ojibwe from her birth parents, and she was adopted from an early age by white liberal parents, Sarah and Glenn. Also, Louise is half Ojibwe, half Native as well, so that's pretty cool to read from her perspective. She's writing from her own community, so I thought that was really rad. So at the start of the book, she's on this mission to find her birth mother after her birth mother sent her a letter through mail, and her birth mother's name is Mary Potts, and she lives on a reservation. I think this is the first instance where we learn Cedar as a character is pretty strong and stubborn, because this is all happening. She was on her mission to meet her birth mom while the onset of panic and fear has begun to spread to the US. There's rumblings of martial law, and there's a lot of rumors surrounding the whole evolution thing, and it's just a very chaotic state the US is in, but Cedar kind of doesn't care and still wants to meet her birth mother. So she ends up meeting her mother, who goes by the name Sweetie, and her stepfather, Eddie, and her half-sister, Mary Potts Jr. We also learned that Cedar is 4 months pregnant, which is like having a giant target on your back during this time, and it's kind of the jumping point for the rest of the events of the novel to advance forward. As the book goes on, the US is dismantled, a new religious order is risen, and the borders, both Canada and Mexico, have closed themselves off to the US. The science fiction aspects of this book really ramp up in the last third of the book. There's drones, there's creepy, almost invisible spyware that can detect pregnant women without them knowing, and there's this really creepy lady called Mother, and she just appears randomly on computer screens without being prompted to, so it kind of gets a little horrifying near the end. But this book has been compared a lot to Handmaid's Tale, and I do see some similarities. There's definitely the entire, only a certain amount of women are able to get pregnant, repopulate everybody in a religious order, and this book is told from the perspective of Cedar, so she's writing in a diary almost, which is kind of like offered in Handmaid's Tale, but I think this book is way more familiar than Handmaid's Tale. And I think that's because although this is kind of a dystopian setting, all Cedar wants really is a family to call her own, and she's seeking a belonging, and she just wants to belong in some place. And I think there's a lot of examples in the book where you can kind of see that. We see it with her birth family. She tries to connect with Sweetie and her little sister and her great-grandmother and her great-grandmother, and tries to find herself in them. We see it with her adopted family. She loves them and she cares for them, but she's always kind of harbored this resentment towards them that she can't exactly place because they're not her real parents. We see it through her baby's father, Phil, but she ignores a lot of red flags about him because she doesn't want to see the entire picture about him. And most importantly, I think we see it through religion. Cedar is a born-again Catholic woman. She converted, and religion has become this very fundamental part of her life. It is in every page, in every thought. Cedar always has her faith in the backdrop. So there's very, very clear in-your-face parallels with the Virgin Mary and Cedar. Cedar is a girl who is due on December 25th, and her child, as we learn in the book, is one of the originals, meaning that her child is Homo sapien, is perfectly healthy, nothing is wrong with the child, and it could be the answer to the survival of the human race. And there's many other characters in the book that you could kind of associate with other biblical figures. There is a Judas type character, and then I think her birth family, like her mom, Mary Potts, her little sister, Mary Jr., are kind of these Mary Magdalene figures, and I think she's more of a Mary Magdalene than she herself admits. She talks to a lot in the book to Saint Cateri, who is the first Native American woman to become a saint in the Catholic Church. She's a person that Cedar prays to a lot, and again, I think it's because they share a lot of similarities. Besides the Native American traits, they're also people that were converted into Catholicism later in life. St. Cateri became Catholic when she was 19 years old, and Cedar was well into her 20s, I believe, when she converted. Cateri was also adopted like Cedar, and she was judged by her adopted parents for converting to Catholicism. And I think that's something that Cedar can also latch onto. Cedar's the editor for her Catholic magazine, a zine, at her church, and her baby's father is also from her church. So this person is very connected to the church, but at the same time, she's devout but not narrow-minded, in the sense that she also takes in from her Native American origins and kind of listens to a lot of the myths her grandmother and her birth mother tell her and tries to relate them to her own life. I'm sure there's more Bible allusions, but my Bible knowledge is pretty rusty. But what I'm trying to say is that in this book, religion is almost this double-edged sword. Cedar is religious, but the society that's hunting her down is also a religious one as well. And a lot of the choices and decisions she makes throughout the novel are based on her faith, but they don't necessarily mean good things. Usually a lot of the decisions she makes only create bigger problems and more pain and more hurt for herself throughout the book. And really, I think what it comes down to it is that this is a book that explores the theological concept of free will. And what I mean by that is Cedar is almost at peace with all of her decisions because they are her decisions that she makes by herself, and nobody else has changed them, or that was a weird noise, or nobody else has taken her agency away from her. And that's what I think is one of Cedar's biggest qualities in her character. So back to free will. I think this book is just at contrast with itself, because free will basically is making your own choice, right? But I learned that the Catholic Church asserts that freedom is a power rooted in reason and will. So free will is freedom. But technically, Cedar herself isn't completely free because she's being hunted down because of her condition and because of her womb. So it's like she's mentally free, but physically not. So what does that even mean? You know, and I think that's something that's left to the reader's own interpretation. What does freedom mean? What does free will mean? What does anything mean? It's very interesting because her faith keeps her mentally strong even when it's physically hurting her. And I think it's very interesting for a sci-fi dystopian novel to explore, because I feel at least that usually in sci-fi books or whatever, it's either black or white, good or bad, and it doesn't really explore the shades of gray. And I think this is a book that's just really happy to deal with religion and live with it in the middle. Because of these decisions, a lot of this book is about inner growth. And a lot of the times, some of the background characters, background plots, and kind of arcs disappear and fizzle into nothing. For example, there's like no clear explanation of how bad things are in the US or how fast this backwards evolution is going, because we're only exposed to Cedar and Cedar's mind. So although we do get glimpses, we never get full pictures of what's actually going on. There's no real explanation about the shift from normal evolution into backwards evolution. But I give this a pass, I guess, because I think the point the book is trying to make is that as quickly as life can happen, it can be taken away just as randomly and quickly. But I still think it would have been a little useful to know how fast things are going, because we have a timeline. This book is like a diary, so Cedar numbers her pages by days and months, so we can tell how fast her body's progressing, but not necessarily like the broader scope of things. And I know that wasn't the point, but it just would have been nice to know to keep a timeline in your head with how everything is progressing. There's some very late chapter family revelations that are revealed in this book. They're very big plot twists, and because you know that family and belonging is so important to Cedar, when they're revealed, you expect a fallout, you expect something big to happen, and it really doesn't. It's kind of anticlimactic, and it kind of like mellows out and just fades into the background with the rest of the plot. The ending is physically not a good place for Cedar, but I think emotionally she's reached this moment of clarity where she's at peace with everything that's happened in her life and everything that she's done, all of her decisions, she's just at peace with it. And that's why I kind of want to almost call this book a coming of age story, because at the start of the book, she was going through some emotional turmoil with her birth family, her adopted family, and her baby's father, and church, and everything around her was kind of just swirl in her mind. But at the end of the book, she's like very peaceful. I think she almost really embodies the spirits of these saints that she looks up to, Saint Carud and Virgin Mary. That being said, I wanted more because the ending was very frustrating and sad for me as a reader, because you think they're going to go one way, and I think you expect the female heroine to be in an active position, at least at the end of the book, where she's planning something or is actively fighting against something, if she's in a position where she's at a low or she's being captured. But instead, our female protagonist, she's very passive, she's kind of accepting of her fate, and that's kind of annoying. But this book is super engaging and really easy to connect with the character of Cedar, and I think that's what makes it all the more personal. It's really easy to root for her and want for her to have the best life, basically. Overall, I think this is a good book. I think it's a book mainly about the concept of free will in a theological perspective, and it's about deconstructing popular conventions in sci-fi dystopian novels. For me, it was kind of chilling because you can kind of see this happening, especially in our current political climate in the US. This is a future that doesn't seem that far off, honestly. I think you should read this book if you're a fan of the genre. It's definitely different from what is the norm, I guess, for it. The characters flip on themselves and destroy conventions and all that kind of stuff, so I think it's definitely worth the read. But I don't think you would necessarily enjoy it if you need like a bigger context. A lot of it is drawing from context clues and context from Cedar's own writing, so if you're a person that wants direct facts written on page, I don't think this is necessarily a book for you to read. So yeah, that was my video on this book. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a comment. Thanks for watching, bye. Side note though, so this week has been another weird week for me, and I went to this, which is the Death Cure Maze Runner red carpet screening, and I have questions. I have never read I never read a Maze Runner book in my life, and I've never seen a movie of these in my life, and I watched it the other day and it was kind of interesting. So now I'm wondering if you guys have read this book, is it worth reading? Is it badly written? Let me know if you know. But yeah, okay, now bye.